good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Popchef. I'm the president of the Speedway Redevelopment Commission. And this is the regular session of the commission for Monday, June 17th, 2019. What I'd like to do is call the meeting to order. And also, I'd like to introduce everyone at the table. On my immediate right is Gordon Rundle, commission member. To my immediate left is, my wife and I share everything, even summer colds. Brody Duncan, vice president. To his left is Dr. Terry Reed, who represents the Speedway School Corporation. And on Terry's left is Bob Clutter, the counsel to the town of Speedway. Also in the audience, we have Mr. Gary Rakes, who is a town councilor from District 1. And we also have Jacob Bladesdell, who is our town manager for Speedway. And then immediately on the right, I have Tim Gropp, who is the economic development director. You thought I forgot you, correct?
I was fine either way.
I thought you were. And then also in the audience is Tim Ramian, who's our executive assistant for economic development. So I've established that we do have a quorum, and the proper notification of the meeting was posted as required by Indiana state law. So at this time, what I'd like to do is I'd like to open up the lectern to any public comment, if anyone in the audience would like to come forward. Anyone? Anyone? Okay, hearing no public comments, let's move on to the next agenda item. We have the meeting minutes for our regular session of May 20th, 2019. And we also have a joint executive session meeting minutes from June 4th. And then I believe we also have Redevelopment Commission executive session from May 20th. So unless I hear any, and these had been distributed earlier, we had the opportunity to review those and make any comments or corrections. And unless I hear any further comments, I will accept those by consent. Thank you. All right, the next agenda item is our register of claims, which has been distributed in our packet. No, it hasn't.
Monty emailed them.
Yeah, we had them
Oh, there it is.
electronically.
Some extras.
Okay. All right. That has been distributed prior to our meeting. So Tim, if you would like to give us any explanation or any updates.
Sure, just a few notes. I'd like to point out the TIF expenses. So we had the second payment for 2019, the estate of Betty Bunch, which is part of our parking contract for the Wilcox Environmental
Parking.
Building, Rosner Building. There's too many W words in that corner.
There are.
We also have the expense of the Globe paving for 11th and Main, which is adjacent to the War Memorial. As you might recall, we swapped that commitment with the town council, and we'll be paying that and crediting that towards the B&O trail match, which we'll be addressing probably next month. We also, a couple other unusual ones. We had 10 barricades that was purchased part of our May, just traffic control. We had added on the 4501 lot this year, as well as a couple other lots on Main Street. So we needed a few extra barricades that we use for that, and we use those throughout the year for different events as well. So just part of the expense of business in May. We also had the public parking sign, which was part of our expense for the Wilshaw public parking. We just took that out of our general operating instead of a TIF for that one. Then you can see we had a change order for B&O Trail. That was on top of the 20% match. There was a small change order later on, so we're just paying that one directly. Most of the rest of the match came out of Storm. The two Keyser Consulting Group are related to estimated road values for our bonds. So we'll keep tabs of those as part of the expenses for our bond issues. And then you have that will be the last Travel Indiana bill that we have for the article that we put out in May in Travel Indiana.
Okay.
Just quick note as well on the budget versus actual. Everything's trending pretty well. The only one I wanted to point out was our property management expenses is a little high, and that's kind of become our catch-all for anything that is kind of repair maintenance. That's an adjustment we'll make. This is our first year doing the operating budget. We'll kind of adjust out a miscellaneous expense item next year. We're just kind of using that as our catch-all, which is why it's a little bit higher.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Anybody have any additional questions for Tim?
The parking sign, did that include the getting it hooked up to electricity?
I think we paid the electrical last year, or last month. So, yeah, I think that was last month, and then this was the actual sign itself.
Okay, unless there are any more questions or comments, I will entertain a motion to accept the Register of Claims as submitted.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to accept the Register of Claims as submitted.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, let's take it to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the Register of Claims as submitted, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes 3-0. Thank you, Tim. All right. Next item is our project updates, and I will again ask Mr. Gropp to give us a good overview of, a brief but good overview of all of our project updates.
You know me well. Yes, so the Wilshaw project, there's not much of an update there. The rains obviously slowed things down a little bit, but they're still making good progress. You will see some cars parking in the Zellman lot starting tomorrow. I need to unlock it. They asked to start using the overflow lot for just the amount of people that'll be on site. So that'll ramp up a little bit, but everything seems to be in line. Most of the concrete work is done now. They just have the landscaping to go on the south side of the apartments, and that's obviously weather dependent, which doesn't look great
It hasn't looked
anytime
good at all.
soon.
No,
So
not at
as soon as they can, they'll break free and get that completed. I still haven't gotten exact data when they're going to start using the ticketing system back in the public parking, but the times I've been down there, I always keep an eye on it. It does seem like more and more cars are using that spot, so that's good to see.
Okay.
So want me to keep going into?
Oh, just keep going. Unless anybody has any questions, you're going to be on a roll.
They donated some landscaping material, didn't they?
Yeah, so they actually quite a bit. There was a few trees and a lot of landscaping that was donated to the town. They weren't ready to plant it in a big area. It was an overpurchase. So they were able to utilize some of that in the parks and on Main Street and different planting areas. So we do appreciate that. That was a nice gesture by the Wilshaw group.
I do have a question concerning the apartment lease-up. Do you know the number of units or percentage of occupancy at this point?
I do not have any numbers right now, but I did hear that after race time, there was a pretty significant bump of interest and inquiries on rentals there. So,
Well, I know they had a large marketing effort over that entire weekend, and the music, some heavy and hard rock and roll. I'm sure, Brody, you could hear it all the way down at your street. So hopefully that garnered an awful lot of interest in the project.
I'll see if I can find out where they're at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next one.
2500 North High School Road. Things are really moving there. We've taken steps on the bond. The bond process is moving very smoothly on that. We did have an initial meeting. We're going to be rezoning that entire property. It's a commercial special district. We're rezoning it to a commercial special district. Seems a little odd, but we have to change some of the uses that we're intending to put out there based on what it was previous. So we had a really good meeting this morning, and that process is going to get underway immediately. We're also meeting with Department of Public Works to discuss 25th and High School Road intersection improvements next Monday. And we're meeting with the developers on Friday to discuss some of the details of the final documents that are going to need to be finished up prior to closing. The only note of change is we're probably going to get everything lined up and agreed upon by July, but we're probably going to hold off just a little bit on actual closing, so we don't just have the bond. We're going to try to line it up with the bond closing a little more, so we don't just have money sitting in a bank account. not doing anything. So it'll probably be a couple months after the July deadline. But we're going to make sure all the documents are ready to execute and move forward at that time to meet the deadlines of the resolutions we have in place. So it just didn't make a lot of sense to execute the purchase, then let the money sit there while we're waiting on the bond process. And some of the rezone is going to take us about 90 days as well. So we're trying to line all that stuff up. Hopefully we close, rezone, and get the bond proceeds all at once.
Okay. Anybody have any further questions of Tim on 2500? Let's move on to the 1300 block environmental cleanup project.
So they started mobilizing today. They worked out an agreement with Shelby on utilizing the Auto Tech building as their kind of centralized hub, so they didn't have to bring in a portable storage unit. They will have, starting tomorrow, they will start doing what's called Phase 1, which is the injection portion. They'll go down 13, 14 feet and inject stabilizing compounds into the soil down there, closer to the water tables. And then they'll have to monitor that for about a month or 2 to 3 weeks, I'd say. And then they'll come back in and mobilize and do what's Phase 2, which is actual removal of the soil. In that case, we'll actually shut down almost the entire block of what we have. For Phase 1, we'll keep 1346 open, so public parking and employee parking still available there.
Sure.
Phase 2, we'll have to close down for a week or two. They'll excavate 6 to 8 feet, put it into roll-off containers. Then they have to test it. They'll actually set up a mobile lab at the Autotech facility, test the soil, determine if it's hazardous or non-hazardous, then take it to the appropriate landfill at that time. So that'll probably be the third week of July or so is what they're estimating at this time. But they've blocked off the section they need for the actual injection portion of Phase 1, and that should be getting started tomorrow. We have talked to the people that utilize that spot and made sure that they had alternative parking during this. And we've also talked to our neighbor at the clock shop to make sure he's aware of everything that's going on.
Okay. Are we able to provide any employee parking on the former Autotech site?
Right now, we don't have that many that utilize the 1300 block, so we're actually going to have them park on the gravel lot to the west, adjacent to that home, the one that we'll be purchasing, and then also 1346 in the interim. And then for Phase 2, we might actually have them utilize the
Well, I
Autotech side.
was going to say that's going to take quite a few more parking spaces,
Yeah.
Phase 2.
Yeah, because we'll actually shut down 1346. That's where
Right.
we'll actually deliver the roll-off containers. They'll back. We didn't want them to use the alleyway, so they'll actually be using 1346 and dropping the roll-off containers off on the gravel portion, and then excavate next to it.
Okay.
So, pretty big operation, but we've been waiting for it and excited to see it start.
That'd be kind of interesting to watch. Yeah, and a tremendous improvement, to that brownfield area.
Yeah.
And
Anybody have any further questions?
all the funding for that's being taken care of through the insurance, correct?
Yeah, so this is not a town cleanup effort. It was something that we were aware of when we purchased the property, but this is all being done by the previous owner's insurance and handled through IDEM and the insurance carriers. We just happen to be the owners of the property, so we're just authorizing the use of it. So
Perfect.
Great. Thank you. And the final update on our town strategic plan?
the only note is that everything's been submitted to Okra, and we're just waiting for a response back from Okra on approval of the final plan, and hope to hear something back soon for the reimbursement of the grant money for that. Beyond that, it's just a matter of we need to take some time, probably do a little subcommittee and break down how we want to start tackling some of the items on the to-do list. There were quite a few in that immediate section, if you recall. So.
Great. Any further questions on strategic plan update? Great. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate the quick and thorough overview of the updates. You'll notice on the agenda, our new business items contain 3 resolutions that all relate to the 5300, what was formerly known as the PNC building, the 5300 project. And at this time, I'd like to call Jacob Blaisdell, the town manager, to the lectern to give the audience a that is here, as well as viewing through our live streaming video, an update on the project.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. So, as you said, we have several resolutions in front of you for this evening, all related to the project. So, I thought it would be a good idea to provide a bit of an update, kind of on what we're doing and why. And I will try to keep it as brief as possible, with you being under the weather. But there's some good information here that we can hopefully cover. So, I do have some slides prepared, and we're going to try to get that into the on the screen if we can. There we go. I've been town manager for over 2 years, and I haven't had to do this yet. So Bill and I are coordinating this morning, so bear with us. So if we can go ahead and go to the first slide here. Perfect. So just from a high-level standpoint, some of the goals and what we're trying to do here. So creating a government center with the appropriate space and ability to serve the community for well over 50 years into the future for our community, right in the middle of town. If you draw a circle around town, if you look at the map of Speedway and try to put a point in the middle of it, this intersection is right there at Crawfordsville and Lyndhurst is right in the middle. Certainly creating an environment that's conducive to a stronger communication and more collaboration between departments within the town, and then creating a space that's welcoming and where services are consolidated and there's easier access for residents. And certainly creating space that is larger and can handle larger town meetings that we have for community use. I was just talking with one of our city county councilors. She was looking at doing a larger town hall meeting, and we didn't really have, like, maybe the library, maybe there's some other space, but we don't really have that within the town offices. So one of the goals is to kind of give us that space, which we'll have in this building. So moving on to the next slide here. So various project benefits. So there's certainly efficiencies to the public from consolidating services under one roof. We have people that will show up at our offices in the annex in the strip mall. They need to be at town hall. You'll have them show up at town hall. They need to be at the annex. And then if you are fortunate enough to show up at the right place first, you're going to be, you might not have all the right people there. So if you're maybe there to reserve a parks facility, well, our parks director doesn't work out of that at the town hall there in the annex. Building permit, no, the building commissioner actually works in the annex. So there's all sorts of instances where you can't get the right people together easily to provide the right information. And then certainly from standpoint of how we operate within the town, having different employees under different roofs is also pretty inefficient. Driving between offices, not always able to share space and utilize the same equipment. This building will also give us a police station that is centrally located. This town has been talking about a new police station for the better part of 2 decades, and this will give us, our department, the appropriate space and technology to continue serving the community. It also eliminates a lease that we currently have in the shopping center. We do continue that lease and pay on it monthly. And then, of course, when you have older buildings, like the town hall building here and the police station, they get to a point where they need some larger capital improvements. Of course, we've purchased an older building, but we're making those larger capital improvements. We're kind of getting to the point where we need to either look at making investments where we're at or consolidating into a building and putting the capital investment in that building. And then this also, I don't want to get too much into this topic, but there are some kind of larger visions with the B&O Trail going through here, being right next to the park, some ideas for use of this space as the town would start to vacate some of these areas. A lot of ideas there. But this kind of helps further that vision and make that potential reality. So moving on to the next slide. Bill's on it. So renovation work and what exactly are we doing? So a lot of the work in this building is going to be focused on what I would call the guts of the building, the stuff you're not even going to see. The more technical term is MEP, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. But it's stuff that's going to help the building run efficiently and smoothly. And it's infrastructure that if we just sort of ignored and just put up the walls and went in and said, I will do it later, it's going to be a lot more expensive to fix these kinds of things down the road. So we're trying to make the right improvements and the right investments. Certainly we're doing a build out for the police station. A little bit for the offices, we're reusing walls where we can. But of course the police station does have some build out. It was an office building, not a police station. So there's some improvements we need to make for that. And then you certainly look at what we're doing from a cost perspective, looking at a square foot basis, we are right now looking at about 178 to 194. Depends on potentially some add alternates that we might do as part of the project as we're looking at bidding this out. So that's why there's a bit of a range. But that does include the cost of acquiring the building, and it includes the cost of construction management. Look at new builds right now. Estimates from our construction manager are 250 to 300 a square foot. There was a community that built a fire department somewhat recently that was a little north of 220, but a big chunk of their space was garage space, which of course is quite a bit cheaper to build. And of course, there's a community that recently built a police station for north of $300 a square foot. So there's a variation, but we're pretty comfortable with where we're at right now. As part of the purchase agreement, we also retained the furniture that was in it, and which was great. There's a lot of filing cabinets. There's a lot of furniture that we can reuse. Some of it really nice, some of it not so nice, but we're in the process of sorting through that and trying to reuse what we can. And then I think if none of what I said makes sense, or if I'm just droning on here, just the takeaway is we want this building to be nice. We want it to be durable and efficient and operate well, but it's not going to be excessive. I mean, I know everybody's walked into some really nice government buildings, and sometimes they're town halls, sometimes they're courthouses or whatever. This is not going to be a building that we don't want people to walk in and say, man, they cut corners and I'm not sure why they went to all this trouble if this is what they built. But you're not going to have, oh wow, this is really incredible. We're trying to kind of strike that balance, and the steering committee's been on board with that vision from the first day. Moving on to the next slide. So just kind of lay out where we're at right now, the different buildings outlined there in red. You do have the town hall, the building, of course, we're sitting in right now, the police department off to the right, and the picture on top that roughly outlines our town annex office in the mall center. A lot of offices, and then I also have listed here school administration. They're not really giving up space, they're freeing up space that they can then use for academic purposes. Right now, the administrative offices a lot of them are in the high school, but there's also some scattered out through some of the other schools, and they're looking at this as an opportunity to kind of reclaim that space for educational purposes and get the administrative offices out of there. Moving on to the next slide. So this is the 5300 Crawfordsville Road. It does then consolidate virtually all of our administrative offices, as well as the police department and cable. We're adding conference rooms, we're adding community space that we really don't have right now. And as I mentioned, having a larger space that we can all congregate in as a community, we're certainly increasing the size of the square footage for our council chambers. And I do have to note that it is in the shape of a number 1. Reportedly, that's because it was like a first bank of something when it was originally built, and it was intentional. But I think in a racing town, being first, if you're not first, you're last. And I think it's just destiny that this would eventually become the town of Speedway Town Hall. So moving on to the next slide. So how are we using this space? This kind of denotes from the color scheme here what's going where, and if on the top pictures, if you look left to right, you go from the top floor to the first floor or ground floor, and then to the basement. But really, what we're trying to share is a lot of this is to give our police department the space that they need to continue and conduct their operations. And then there is a decent amount of building support, of course, from elevators and better ADA compliance and those types of things. But then after that is the shared space and the community space. So that's really where the focus is, of where we're allocating a lot of space in this building. Moving on to the next slide. So where are we at with the development process? So I went ahead and I started all the way back in January of 2013, which is when they finalized a study 2 town managers ago. Barbara Lawrence started the process of looking at okay, we obviously have some facilities issues here. Where can we go, and what would be a good place to go, and what kind of square footage do we need? And as part of that process, the site 5300 Crawfordsville Road was identified as a very good location, but of course it was not for sale in 2013. In 2015, space was leased in the annex. Then finally in November 2018, the building was for sale, and we were able to acquire it at that time. We quickly selected an architect and a steering committee, and then I have highlighted in yellow where we're at right now is in the kind of tail end of the design process, which we hope to wrap up here in August. And then in September, we hope to take the project to bid and award it, and then finance it. After that, after it's awarded, we want to line the financing up with the cost of the project, and then we'll be under construction until at least July 2020. And I'm kind of saying, Tim wanted me to call it late summer, which probably would have been smarter than putting an actual date on here, but we're looking at August 2020 as the move-in.
As we know, every project stays right on schedule.
That's right. That's exactly right, Tim. So here it is. Here's how the building's looking. I mean, it's certainly very recognizable. The real difference from the outside is what is the eastern portion of it. So right now, if you think about it, there's it was kind of the main entrance into the branch. So there's a vestibule there out front that we're not going to need. And then off to the side of that, where there was the ATM and the night drop box, there was also like a safe in that building, and it wasn't, the roof, I guess, wasn't up to code. And by the time we would try to get this huge safe out of there and then get that space to code, it just, the square footage benefit was not worth it. The cost benefit analysis just didn't work out. So this metal capping kind of just, all those kinds of problems that we would have just kind of caps it in, and it's a durable metal material then that we can just put around the side. And it's not bad. I don't mean to say we're sweeping dirt under the rug, but it does just kind of neatly cap that off and kind of secure that. And then moving on to the next slide. So the only real difference here is that we're looking at adding a north canopy. So something I didn't mention earlier is you've got the police department from this picture is kind of that right side, which actually was a new addition to the building. That's kind of the newer part of it. And we're setting this up so the police station can really kind of function on its own. And so you don't have a lot of between access. So if somebody, for example, went into the town hall side of the building and went into the clerk treasurer's office, that would be right there. And they said, oh, actually, you need to go over to the police department. We don't really want people to just kind of, there just be an open hallway where you just hop in through the police department. That's going to be pretty secured off. So barring really bad weather, we would kind of want folks to go then outside and then go over to the police department. So we do have those north canopy additions. We're planning on adding in for that purpose. That's what we're doing. Next slide. So the steering committee has been comprised of our town council president and town council vice president, our clerk treasurer, myself, our chief of police. We did let Tim participate in the process. And then our school assistant superintendent, soon to be superintendent, has been participating and kind of serving as our steering committee for this project. And then we have been utilizing Meyer Najum as our construction manager and Schmidt Associates as our architect and engineering in the process. And then last slide gets more to kind of why are we here tonight and why are we talking to the Redevelopment Commission. So as Tom mentioned, we're talking about the financing process, and there's really two viable financing paths for the project to raise the funds to make these improvements. One is by financing and leasing the building itself, so the project itself, and the other is to finance it by leasing roads. And Heather with Ice Miller is going to talk a little more about this after I conclude my remarks. But they're to provide some more details for this, but there are some pros and cons to either method. The short version is that by financing the building, we would have to pay capitalized interest. So we can't really pay on the bonds until we've occupied the building, which means we'd have to set funds aside to pay it while we're in the process of moving in. And if we set those funds aside, we have to start paying interest on it right away. And so you're essentially paying compound interest, and it's not very efficient. If we go the route of leasing roads, we can pay on those and start making payments on the bonds relatively quickly. Unfortunately, though, while the process of leasing roads does save us money, this process does need to go through the Redevelopment Commission, and so it brings in some additional meetings and some additional conversations, which isn't a bad thing, but it is a little bit more work, and but we're not talking about saving a few dollars here. We estimate that on a conservative end, by going this route, we're going to save about $200,000 in interest costs. And as we're throughout this project, always looking for ways to do things well, but save money where we can, this became the preferred path that we wanted to go down. So I think just in summary, I mean, this is a good project and we're excited about it. In general, in the town of Speedway, we don't do a lot. I mean, we finance redevelopment projects through TIF. We finance things for our water and wastewater utilities, but we haven't done much in our facilities for quite some time. You look at the debt of the town, and all but about $2.5 million is redevelopment, and therefore TIF and backed by the developers, or it's somehow tied to our utilities. So this is not something we do a whole lot, but every now and then you do need to make those investments. And like I said earlier, we're either going to be investing in the facilities we're in now or finding a way to consolidate under one roof, which is why this process has been in conversation for the last couple of town managers. And I'll take any questions that you have.
One quick note, Jacob. It was on the last slide, but I think it's a good point of emphasis that, this is, the council evaluated both these options and felt this, because of the savings, it made more sense to go through the redevelopment authority, redevelopment commission route. But the council is still very involved in this process and will ultimately have the approval through the process to move the bond forward. So we appreciate seeing Councilor Rakes here tonight.
Yeah, like I said, there's some back and forth with this process, and so it is a little, again, some more meetings, but from a financial and cost saving perspective, council and I felt it was well worth it.
Yeah, Jacob, I know this is going to be a major initiative, but it's going to bring a tremendous benefit to, the town as well as all the stakeholders and citizens. I don't have any further questions. Anybody else?
Did you go through a breakdown on what it would do to the average homeowner? How that would affect taxes or whatever the case would be?
Yeah, so our financial advisor from Baker Tilly is here, and I'm not going to make you come up unless I say something wrong, Brian, but so they he said he'd kick me from behind if I didn't hear. So we did run that analysis, and that's something that they can look at. It's not always quite as straightforward as you want it to be. In Indiana, we have property tax caps, and this project will not impact those. So this is not a referendum. So those property tax caps will kick in, which for this project we estimate will be for homeowners with an assessed value of about $140,000. And so if you're a homeowner and we do this project and you're 140 or north, you'd expect your annual property tax to go up about $60 a year, or $5 a month as part of this project. And then, of course, if your assessed value is below that, which I think the median was at about 120, then you would pay less than that, obviously.
Any additional questions of Jacob? Well, Jacob, thank you very much. I really appreciate that excellent presentation,
No, thank you.
particularly since it's the first time you've given it publicly.
Yes.
All right. The first item of new business relates to Resolution 2019-07, which is the declaration of official intent to reimburse expenditures. And all three of these resolutions we'll be entertaining this evening have already been approved by the Redevelopment Authority. I believe that they have not been approved by the they will be approved by the No, we're the first stop.
We're the first step.
Okay, we're the first step. So thanks for that clarification.
Welcome.
Tim, if you'll give us an overview of the resolution and its intent.
Yeah, so Resolution 2019-07, because this is the route we're taking for this bond issuance, which we're very comfortable with, this resolution simply is our official intent to say if we have expenses related to the issuance of the bond, that we're able to reimburse them when the bond is issued. So we'll keep track of it. We don't anticipate many. We had one tonight for some engineering costs, but beyond that, it won't be a significant amount. But we have the ability to recoup those costs at the end when the bond's issued. So that's simply what this resolution is.
Does anybody have any questions of Tim regarding Resolution 2019-07? Well, hearing no further questions, I will entertain a motion to accept Resolution 2019-07, the declaration of official intent to reimburse expenditures.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-07, the declaration of official intent to reimburse expenditures.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
You didn't have an option, did you? We have a motion and a second. Any further questions, comments? Well, let's take it to a vote. All those in favor of accepting Resolution 2019-07, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? I don't know why I do that, because we only have 3 of us, and we all has accepted that, but it's just kind of a habit of mine. So, the motion passes 3-0. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that. Okay, the next resolution on the agenda, Resolution 2019-08, is the preliminary determination of the Speedway Redevelopment Commission to enter into a lease. And for this discussion and this presentation and overview, I'd like to ask Heather James, who is our attorney in this case, to come to the lectern. Heather, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So Jacob and Tim did a great job of explaining everything to you, and I will try not to ramble and be redundant for once. So this second resolution before you this evening, Resolution 2019-08, is the statutorily required preliminary determination resolution. And because of the size of this financing, a bond maximum amount of up to $8,750,000, that makes this project a controlled project under the statute. So Indiana code requires that we have 2 hearings where the financial information and the parameters that are provided in this resolution are made available. So the folks at Baker Tilly were kind enough to help me fill in all the blanks and fill out that mostly section 2 of this resolution that explains to you the tax impact. And today is the first hearing on this resolution, and the second will be on July 15th. So before you would take any action on this one, I'd ask that you open up the public hearing for any public comments. And then if you don't mind, can I go ahead and talk about the next resolution since they kind of go together?
Well, they do go together, and I'd really appreciate you consolidating both and giving us a good explanation of the Resolution 2019-08, which is basically the approval of the lease form that we'll be executing.
Right.
Thank you, Heather. Please proceed.
Thank you. So it preliminarily approves the lease that's between the authority and the commission, and we anticipate the public hearing on the lease on the July 15th meeting. We've drafted a proposed form of the lease, which basically describes the leased premises on Exhibit A that I think Tim gave to you just before the meeting, the maximum term, which is up to 20 years, the maximum annual lease rentals of $700,000, the covenant to levy the special benefits tax to pay the lease rentals, and then all of the things that you'd expect to see with regard to maintenance, insurance, tax covenants, so that these can remain tax-exempt bonds, and then the standard statutorily required language for a financial lease, just the sorts of covenants that the statute requires you to have in there. So we anticipate, again, returning for the meeting on July 15th. And then we'll be back again in August to ask you to approve the matters related to the bond financing as opposed to the matters related to the lease itself. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about these resolutions, the lease, the process.
I don't have any questions. Anybody?
Just-
ask a question?
Just to be clear on the purpose for this, obviously, is the fact that we can use the roads immediately as opposed and.
Exactly right. You don't have to wait for the use and occupancy of the building, of what we're calling the town project. And I wanted to make sure it was really clear throughout the documents. So I don't think it's actually legally required to describe the town project because technically the proceeds are being used for the acquisition of roads. But if you read through the documentation, it clearly states that then the acquisition proceeds will be used to fund the renovation and construction of this project. So we're not playing hide the ball. It's very clear to the taxpayers, very clear to State Board of Accounts what we're doing here.
And we're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars through the process.
That's correct. And this is a structure that we see used very frequently all over the state.
It's similar to our 2500 project.
Yes, we're going through almost the exact same process. And maybe real quick, for that process, we're using the Building Corp and EDC.
Okay.
Why are we using the RDA on this particular one?
So the 36110 is the building corp statute that Tim is referencing, and it is very specific with regard to what the project can be, and it is basically for structures, and then very detailed language with regard to what sort of transportation projects can be financed, and roads and speedway just do not fall into that definition. The redevelopment statute, on the other hand, provides a lot of flexibility, so we're able to lease the roads under this statute, but not under 36110.
With that, Mr.
Any
Chef,
further questions at this point?
Well, yeah, just if the bond is capped at $8.75 million,
That's right.
right? And then
That's a maximum, correct?
That's a maximum.
right, and then per this, it says the estimated interest rates ranging 2.85 to 5%. If interest rates were to jump,
Then
would
we'd have
we
to come back to you
okay,
again for an approval to go anywhere above
Of
any of the
5%.
parameters in
Okay.
here.
Either below or above? Not that low.
Above, above.
Just above.
Below, you like that.
Sign it up, sign it up, please do. Yeah.
Is that very likely, Brian?
Great.
Yeah,
Any-
Brian, can you make them go below? Yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice. Any further questions,
I would suggest that you officially open the public hearing.
Oh, yeah.
please?
I would suggest you officially open the public hearing.
That was my next step. Thank you.
We're on the same
And what I'll do
wavelength.
is I will, and thank you to our council who's keeping me on track. I will suspend the regular session of the Redevelopment Commission and open the public hearing to entertain Resolution 2019-08, the preliminary determination for the Redevelopment Commission to enter into a lease. So, public hearing has commenced, and I would like to ask and entertain any questions or comments from the public. Anyone? Anyone? Well, hearing no comments from the public in attendance, I will entertain a motion to close and adjourn the public hearing.
Motion to close and adjourn the public hearing.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further questions? All right, let's take it to a vote. All those in favor of adjourning the public hearing, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? The public hearing is hereby adjourned. And we will reconvene the regular session of the Redevelopment Commission. And based on the presentation and discussion that Heather had given us concerning the preliminary approval of the form of the lease, I would ask if there's any further questions on the form or the exhibit. Any further clarification, Tim?
Are you considering Resolution 2019-08 or 2019-09, or both of them together?
I guess I ought to do that, shouldn't I? Okay. All right, I will entertain a motion to accept Resolution 2019-08.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to vote on approval for the Resolution 2019-08, the preliminary determination of the Speedway Redevelopment Commission to enter lease.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions?
There'll be a second reading on July 15th, so if you have any
Excellent.
questions.
So hearing none, let's take it to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the Resolution 2019-08, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Let's see.
Motion passes 3-0. I got a little bit further ahead on the agenda than I had intended. So we'll move on to Resolution 2019-09, which is the preliminary approval of the form of the lease. And I will entertain a motion to accept that resolution.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to accept Resolution 2019-09, the preliminary approval of form of lease.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, any further questions, comments? Hearing none, let's take it to a vote. All those in favor of accepting Resolution 2019-09, the preliminary approval of form of lease, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes 3-0. Thanks for keeping me on track, Tim.
You're welcome.
Okay. That's your job. Your job and his job, you've got me covered. on
I was
both
just
sides.
seeing if Bob was going to kind of, intervene. But
I was getting ready to jump in, but you beat me to the punch.
A lot of stuff.
All right, the next agenda item is old business, which there is none. So that will move us on to agenda item number 9, which is our director's report.
Just a few additional updates on a few projects that are in process. We are, when we meet with Department of Public Works on 25th and High School, we're also going to piggyback that with 16th and Main. The beautification in front of USAC and Bunch from Main to, I always forget the cross street. I swear it's on the map, but it's their road, so we need to make sure that they're on board with what we're looking at. I did have a chance to meet with USAC and get feedback from them, and very supportive of our efforts, so everything's progressing. If we get positive feedback from Indianapolis, I will then go to the town council to make sure that they're in favor of the
They're in
direction
favor.
we are going, and if that all works out, we will circle back with the engineers and get them moving on actually doing the plans for the project. So there's a little bit of progress there. In your packet, you had a synopsis, just a easy breakdown of our May activities. It was a good year, allowing the Parks Department to utilize our lots for parking. They were able to make over $14,000 for different park programs, matching grant, whatever they really need to use it for. But Tammy's always doing a million things. She does a wonderful job for this town. She's very dedicated and very appreciative of that money. On top of that, the SRC was able to produce just shy of $13,000 just by different leases and parking and everything. As per usual, there's always things we could change, things we want to do a little bit better. So we're going to probably have a little subcommittee get together here, maybe the end of the year, and talk about how we want to tackle 2020 and make a few changes, do a few investments so we're not scrambling at the last minute to do them. Some of that always depends. We always have different properties we have to manage, so some of it's to be determined. But overall, I thought it was a pretty successful year. So, Gilman Street project, we're still hoping. They were hoping to about the week of the 24th get started. The rain,
The weather.
weather-related delays. We'll just put it that way. But we have the plans. We're doing final approvals, and they're anxious to get started as well. So, as soon as we can not have a mud pit, we will hopefully see some progress back there.
What's the anticipated construction timing on that?
I believe he said it was an 8-month build.
8 months? Okay.
But it might be quicker than that. It's a tilt-up building, so it really shouldn't be that difficult to get that up.
I wouldn't think so.
So I would imagine, assuming they can get started, that it'll be up by the end of the year. Hopefully end of third quarter if we can keep moving. 10th and Polka, we did meet out there with the fencing contractor, and we're just working out some details. They're doing some testing on the dirt. Hopefully they'll be able to utilize some of our excess dirt for the cover, but we'll probably need to do some survey work out there just because some of those parcels that we own are tight. Where the B&O trail extension is going to be, we want to make sure that those lines are correct. So we might do a little bit of just staking work to make sure we know the exact boundary spots, but I'll keep you informed on that.
Have they already capped that yet?
No, they haven't actually started. They're still working out bids and start dates, but we're hoping that they start doing some of the brush removal here soon. We just haven't gotten an exact start date. There was some lead time with the fencing that we're ordering, so we wanted to make sure they met on site and made sure they had the right amount that they were ordering and everything. So
Was there a deadline on, oh, excuse me, go ahead.
I probably shouldn't say it. I was just trying to be funny, but dump the dirt from the 1300 block and on top, since they haven't capped it yet.
No, they were very clear they didn't want
They didn't want any more.
contaminated dirt to be put
They
on
just
top
want
of
clean
the
dirt.
top of it.
Oh,
They're
okay.
looking for
Clean dirt only.
Seems unreasonable.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Tim, is there a
Sorry.
idea on timeline within which the containment has to be completed?
They have approval to move forward, so we're just kind of waiting on, I think the bids came in a little higher, so they're looking at some, making sure they can get approvals, Praxair's, I think, off the East Coast, so they're just looking for home approval to move forward. In the meantime, we have some utilization and some final item approvals that they're working on, but we should, hopefully in July, we'll see some movement out there. So, last two things I am working on. We haven't had a chance as a SRC to tour Fatheads, and I'm going to reach out to Rico now that everything has kind of settled down and see if we can't do a tour of that facility and see the amazing job he's done taking a building that was close to demolition and making it an active producer with new employees in our community. So I will circle back with all of you on that. And then last announcement, we had a wonderful groundbreaking at Allison Transmission last Friday. The Innovation Research Center that they're going to be building, it's going to really transform 10th Street. An amazing turnout. I had the governor and Mayor Joe Hogsett and Jason Delisle spoke on behalf of the town council. They had all their employees out there. It was just a really nice event and a really exciting development for 10th Street. May make us consider looking at some of the 10th Street redevelopment projects, things down there a little bit quicker than we had anticipated. So we'll kind of circle back on the strategic plan and kind of revisit our redevelopment priorities and see what makes the most sense as we move forward.
Great. Anybody have any further questions of Tim? Well, before we adjourn, I'd like to ask any of the commission members if they have any updates or information they'd like to share with the audience.
This evening.
I have one.
Yes, sir.
It's been alluded to that Ken Hall, our superintendent, is retiring at the end of this month, and I just personally would like to thank him for all his years of service to both the corporation and the community.
Thank you. And he's done a tremendous job, and I'm sure you've seen all of the significant awards and accolades that our Speedway school system has received most recently. We all have to be really proud of that. Anything?
The
Yes,
schools
sir.
have been very supportive of our redevelopment efforts, and we appreciate that.
Brody, Gordon, anything?
No, I'm good.
Well, I just want to thank Gordon for all of his information on cooling systems and capacitors before the meeting. That was very helpful.
You're welcome.
And I'd also like to, certainly thank the staff. This has been an exceptionally busy year. And there has not been a task or responsibility that they have failed to accept and complete. And with all sincerity, I want to thank Tim, Jacob, and Tim Ramian. Thank you for all of your hard work. And please support all of our Speedway businesses, restaurants, and service entities. So I don't have any further comments, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I make a motion, we adjourn.
Is it your turn?
I don't know, maybe.
I'll second.
He'll
Do I have a
second.
second?
I'll second
Okay,
that.
no further comments. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, meeting's adjourned. Why'd they take
Almost
that
gonna-
gavel away?